Professor Rajkumar, the Vice Chancellor of Jindal Global University, Yashini Kumar, Mr. Y.S.R. Murthy, Mr. Sriram Chaulia, Mr. Arbindo Acharya, other guests on the dais, the faculty members, the participants in this program, students, and the special guests. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here this morning. I think few things in life are predestined. And this is one of these occasions that I feel that I was predestined to come here. Because when I met Professor Rajkumar in National Police Academy, Hyderabad last year, he just mentioned to me that I should come here one day. And I really did not know whether I would ever be able to come here. So when I got the letter from him, by then I had already made my program to Delhi. Yesterday and day before I had some program. So immediately I informed him that yes, I would be very happy to come to this center of excellence in learning. And not only that, I also informed him that my wife will also accompany me. So here we are together. So it is quite a representative participation from various organizations, both the armed forces and also the civilian organizations. Because counter-terrorism or combating terrorism is not really the work of the few. It's not the work only of the uniformed people or those who are involved in investigating the cases against terrorism. If we want to prevent terrorism, we have got to have the eyes and ears of people. People's eyes must be open, their ears must be open, they must be able to hear, they must be able to see and inform. Otherwise, there can be no success, there can be no effective prevention or detection of the acts of terrorism. So most important thing is that whatever your profession is, what your calling is, each one of us should tell the others about the evils of terrorism and bring about a certain level of awareness in the minds of the people so that the civil society by and large becomes aware. In the advanced and developed countries, what happened now, we have from Singapore, a city-state, their people's awareness possibly in this respect is much higher than in our cities and villages. That is why possibly the acts of terrorism in cities like Singapore is much, much less. Not that people don't want to create terrorism. There is no space on earth where terrorism would not like to act. Something could happen in Iran, but terrorism can take place in Kuala Lumpur or in any place. So it is not necessary that the act of reprisal can happen only in that place where something had happened. Terrorism is an act of reprisal against the innocents. It is the gravest crime. It is the most heinous crime because in all acts of terrorism, everywhere it is the innocents who are the victims. So in order to prevent this, we need the support of the people at large. So it is our obligation and responsibility to create a sense of awareness to defeat this menace of the society. So I am sure each one of you, when you go back from here, you go back with a renewed impetus to create the sense of awareness among the large number of population in our country, which by and large are quite indifferent to situations. The problem with our people are that the level of awareness to create a sort of resistance, the alertness against any evil is lacking in our society. In ancient India, we have defined what were those crimes against which the state would to fight vigorously and for which we could even cause death to the people. So from that society we have evolved now. I will tell you, for example, in the ancient Indian Vedic culture, there were 6 types of crimes which he regarded as a very heinous crime. And it was said in the Vedic period that you can cause death to those people who are indulging in that sort of crime. And those crimes were that poison giving poison to people, to kill the people, either mixing poison in food or in water or anywhere. Poison giver was one of the worst criminals. And today in the modern society, we have got correspondingly the act what is known as narcotics, substance and psychotropic substances crimes, for which the punishment is death under the NDPS. The punishment itself is death even now. So from that age, some 2,000, 3,000 years ago, we have said that this is a grave crime and for that it must be death. So the present also we say that it is a death case. Then we had the one who set fire to others' house, dwelling house, or any house where people reside. Arson. It's one of the grave crimes for which death was the punishment those days. Even now, in case that someone sets fire to a house, an act of terrorism or whatever it is, the people are killed inside, the punishment is death, even in these days. Then we had the attack with deadly weapon. For that, the punishment was death. Now, if you attack with deadly weapon, and the tools used in terrorism are deadly weapons, explosives and all that, for that also still we hold that it is the penalty is death. Then we had the crime, plundering public resources. What do we call it now? Corruption in governance. The plundering of public resources those days was really death. Now, of course, we are not having the provision for death sentence for corruption cases. It is a lesser sentence. Anyway, I am not going into the merit of the quantum of punishment. I am only narrating the stages of development of these, the stages of crimes against humanity, against society. The next was occupation of another person's lands. Land is the most important element for sustenance. Today it is even more. If someone goes and grabs another person's land, I think that is one of the worst crimes you can have. Then the last crime in ancient India was for which the death was to be given was kidnapping, particularly kidnapping of a wife. Of course, during those times there was a practice in which the marriage used to be by capture that was socially recognized. But once a lady is married, if someone goes and kidnaps that married lady, the crime was such heinous that for that it was death sentence. So that therefore it was said, if you remember, if you recall, that in epic Mahabharata, the Indian epic, those from abroad, Mahabharata, in that the Bhishma, the grandsire Bhishma, of the many advices he was giving, one advice was this to Yudhishthira. He said, Striyascha apurusha margam sadbalankara bhushitaha nirbhayaha prapadyante yada rakshati bhumipaha. He said, the sign of good governance is that if a woman with his full ornaments on her body can walk in the streets and lanes of the land, that kingdom is well governed. So that was the standard even in that days, that women walking in the streets not only alone but also with her full ornaments, unaccompanied, apurusha margam, unaccompanied on the streets, walking without being molested by anyone or being accosted by anyone, that was the sign of good governance in those days. So even now, this is sign of good governance. In the cities, where women can go in the night, late at night, walk and come back home unmolested, I think that is where law and order is good, in stable condition, where there is life, security to life is there. There is no danger in whatever profession you are in. So that we still maintain this one. I do not know from that extent, from that parameter, our cities, how we classify them now, whether we can call them safe or unsafe. But this is one of the parameters of good governance. Now, for the people who are engaged with this counter-terrorism, the fighting terrorism, basically the police function. And a police function does not mean only the work of the police. Police functions involve the whole society at large. So it is not that a handful of policemen are only responsible for preventing or detecting the crime. It is by and large the whole citizens, the civil societies who are involved in this. Now today we have found some are from the research organization here, some are from the hospitality industries, some are from banking industry, besides the armed forces. We are all coming together to find ways and means to fight terrorism. So if you say that police function, the fighting terrorism is only the police function, the function of the uniformed people, I think this is the narrowest view and we will never be able to do it. So for police function, basically the premises are that the traditional function of the police and also the critical function of the police. The traditional functions, the substantive function that we call is the maintenance of peace, law and order, protection of life and liberty. So these are the traditional conventional functions of the police. But the crisis management is also the responsibility of police organizations or any civil society. Crisis management, the crisis, any act of terrorism creates a crisis in the society. So this has become not a sporadic, it has become almost a day-to-day occurrence in Indian context. We have the crisis in the central India where you have the left-wing extremists, we call it Maoist. We have the crisis in the northeast, crisis in Jammu and Kashmir. In cities, we have these critical issues of threat to life and property. So these are the problems that are adding up with time. In earlier times, possibly we didn't have this development of terrorism. Now terrorists are very innovative people. The people who want to create this state of terrorism, I think they are totally innovative. From the crude bomb IEDs, now we have graduated to the level of those sticky bombs, which few days back we have witnessed in Delhi, the limpet bomb. So how do you prevent all this? It's such innocuous looking subject that anyone walking or going in vehicle can stick something on your vehicle, on the compound wall, or any place, anywhere, in any of these pillars here, it can be stuck. And then you detonate according to your own convenience. So, unless we can match the innovativeness of the terrorist, I think we'll be far behind. We'll be far behind in matching them, in combating this crime. So this innovativeness of terrorists is one of the biggest factors that gives them the plus point. So we come to know the particular device only after it is being used. We do not know what device they are going to use. So we are always behind them. We are not able to overtake them in matters of innovativeness. So this is one of the great disadvantages. Those of you who have the background in research, in the scientific research, should be able to foretell us that what are the things that terrorists are likely to use. Today it is this magnetic bomb. Tomorrow you do not know what they are coming. Maybe they will be adopting something like to the laser. They will send some power that can destroy it. So that can happen to tomorrow's development. So how do we prevent all this? So unless we have this capacity to defeat the innovativeness of terrorism, we will be still groping in the dark how to fight these particular menace. So ladies and gentlemen, it is not easy to prevent terrorism. The only way to prevent is that, as I have told, the whole society must be made aware of the danger of this type of crime. And once terrorism takes place, one terrorist can strike, it is a great success for them. Because one little work, this success in Delhi and what happened in Thailand in the first few days, I think this is a great moral booster for them, that they can do anything. Still we have not been able to catch them. So now next comes the investigation part of it. How far will you be successful? Every crime that is not detected is an encouragement to commit more crime. So every crime that is detected is a setback for the people who commit the crime. So detection is of absolute importance if you want to defeat any particular crime. But are we able to detect? We will say that we need some more acts. Our legislation is poor. We have no power and all this. But I think this is only a subterfuge. It is an excuse to say that we don't have appropriate act to deal with them. You know, the people have a wrong notion, including the police officers to which I belonged once, that we do not have enough power to deal with the situation. I think that is not correct. Any legislation to be successful has to be enforced effectively. Otherwise, legislation is only a piece of paper. There is absolutely no value in that. A law is a value neutral. By itself, it does not prevent or it does not do anything else. It is the people who enforce the law that makes it effective. There are 4 ingredients which are very important in making the law effective. One is that the criminal must know that after committing the crime, he is going to be caught. He must know that. And after he is caught, he must also know that he is going to be punished. Then next, he must also know that punishment is going to be swift. Then the 4th factor is that he must know that punishment is going to be commensurate with his crime. Otherwise, the law cannot be effective. It is immaterial whether there is a death penalty, whether it is imprisonment for life or imprisonment for 10, 15 years, but these 4 factors must be present. Unless these 4 factors are present, there can be no effective implementation of law. Now, in Indian context, we have introduced new laws. We introduced Section 364 AIPC, in which the punishment for kidnapping for ransom, even if you do not kill, if you threaten a person or an institution or a country to do, to omit, to commit something by threat of life to the person who is kidnapped, the punishment is death. Kidnapping for ransom with threat to commit, to force something, the state or the individual to do something is death. Have we been able to prevent kidnapping? We have not been able to prevent kidnapping. Today, kidnapping in many places, particularly the region from where I come from, is almost an industry. It is because why? We have not been able to punish anyone for kidnapping. Has anyone been hung for kidnapping? No, it has not been. So the law, this particular section that they've introduced, remains only in the statutes book. It has not been enforced, so it has not been effective. So people say that to fight terrorism, the armed forces needs protection, and we need to continue Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Yes, no one denies. If you are fighting terrorism, you must have protection. But we should also realize that we are living in a setup in which the voice of the people have to be respected. The voice of the people is that this is a draconian act. Armed Forces Special Power Act is a draconian act. It militates against the spirit of democracy, against the spirit of individual rights and dignity, citizens' rights and dignity. Should we not listen to this aspect? Why not? We must listen to this aspect. Then how do you harmonize the demand of the security forces, the need to protect the security forces, and the desire of the citizens of this country that we do not want this act? Yes, there is a way to find out. The Criminal Procedure Code, as it stands today, gives her ample power for this. Now, what is Section 45? Section 45 of the Criminal Procedure Code itself provides protection from arrest of those people who are engaged in maintenance of public order. That if a person is a central government employee, the armed forces are the Army, Navy, Air Force, Central Paramilitary Forces, if they are deployed somewhere, if they commit something in the course of their official duty, he cannot be arrested without the concurrence of the central government. That is one protection. The other protection is Section 132 in the Criminal Procedure Code, which says that in the course of maintenance of public order, in the absence of the executive magistrate, the officer highest in rank, above the rank of the sub-inspector, can order for opening fire to the extent of causing death. The maintenance of public order. Section 32 gives you that protection, that you cannot be prosecuted without the sanction of the central government or the state government, as the case may be. Section 197 correspondingly gives a public servant, whether it is a magistrate or a simple public servant, against prosecution without a sanction of the central government or the state government, as the case may be. So all these protections are there. What is there in the Armed Forces Special Powers Act are already in the Criminal Procedure Code. The only provision that is possibly not there in the Criminal Procedure Code is that under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the member of the armed forces, the head constable or havildar and above, can cause the demolition of a structure which he believes is used for hiding or for storing explosives or for hiding of the extremist, the terrorist. You can fire the rocket from the location and destroy the building, cause destruction. So this is only the additional section in the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It is there. We can insert this in the Criminal Procedure Code. In Jammu and Kashmir, where they have the different Criminal Procedure Code and different Indian Penal Code, maybe Section 45 of the Criminal Procedure Code is not yet notified there. That can be notified. And if needed, we can insert a sub-clause in the Criminal Procedure Code bringing part of this Armed Forces Special Power Act. The advantage is that the word armed forces will not be there because citizens feel frightened by the word armed forces. So we can give the civilian face to that act by which it will become acceptable to the civil society. And these are the signs, signals that we can send everywhere in the world that India is truly a democratic country, recognizing the rights of the people, the dignity of the human individuals. There is a rule of law in this country. So these are the important things. An Armed Forces Special Powers Act, though it is in promulgation, it is not protecting everyone. Recent incident, what has happened, I do not know if there is a member of the Central Industrial Security Force here, in Uri in early January. I do not know, it might be in 2nd January or so. The members of the Central Industrial Security Force who were tasked to guard installations, they were guarding the hydroelectric power installation in Uri, in a particular village nearby Uri. So some public went there and they became very violent. They threw stones, went inside the campus, broke down their window panes and all that, lifted their wireless sets. They tried to set fire. The poor CISF people, they fired some 70, 90 rounds in the air. Ultimately, when they were not dispersing it, they fired 4 rounds into the crowd, in which 1 died. And immediately, 8 of them were arrested by the local police because the Jammu and Kashmir administration felt it is a pure murder, so they should be arrested. Then where is the protection from the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, under which gives you protection that you cannot be arrested without the central government's concurrence? So even that, in spite of the presence of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, a section of the armed forces are not getting the protection. Then why do you have this act, which cannot provide you protection to all the armed forces equally? Why not we change that act, replace it with something else, which will be given, which will provide equal protection to all the armed forces? So these are the things that we must think. Our action to fight terrorism must also match with the expectation of people as how the armed forces should behave. We have to be careful that fighting a monster will not create a monster within ourselves. If we become monster ourselves, even if you fight a monster and kill a monster, you will still remain a monster. So this is what we have to prevent. All of us must come together, fight this menace of monster, and then let us not become part of this monster ourselves by fighting terrorism. So, ladies and gentlemen, a great Greek philosopher, 3,000 years back, Thucydides, said once, and this is the saying, this is the particular advice which used to be kept on the table of General Colin Powell. Much before he became Secretary of State, when he was General, he kept this particular quotation. The quotation runs like this: of all the manifestations of power, it is restraint that impresses the man most. So this restraint is important in democracy. Restraint when you have the power to kill someone, to restrain the freedom of someone. You need restraint. Exercise of restraint is very important. Because unless you know that he is a terrorist, unless you have been able to pinpoint that the man is a terrorist on a suspicion, if you are depriving him of his life and liberty, I think this is a counterproductive. It will produce more terrorism. In many cases, we produce terrorism ourselves. If today Maoists are there, governance is largely responsible for it. Poverty is the perennial enemy of state. Poverty, exploitation, casteism, superstition, they are the perennial enemies of the state, on account of which acts of terrorism also comes. For large part of the people in the central India, they are not demanding anything. They don't want to secede, but still they are acting as terrorists because they feel aggrieved, they feel oppressed, they feel exploited. So, these perennial enemies of poverty, exploitation, we have got to stop. The people who have taken to arms, many of them also know that the same arms will be used against them to kill them. Still, they are taking to arms. So I do not condone their act of wanton violence, but the situation possibly had made many of them terrorists. By many actions of the police, we make thieves of the common man. That is a known fact. Sometimes if we can't catch anyone, there is a big pressure on us to catch a thief. So we go and catch someone innocent, victimize him, and he becomes a thief, really. So these are examples that we have to think of. So when we are talking about the counter-terrorism, what I would like to advise is that we have to be prepared to face it. At the same time, we have to exercise restraint, so the innocent men and women are not denied their right, their liberty. There are a number of cases in which there are allegations of false what do we call it? Fake encounters. There are a number of cases, fake encounters. And for every act of this fake encounter, we create more terrorists. As a man from the northeast, I feel deeply hurt because even now there are places where there are fake encounters. So we have to avoid that. We must fight terrorists, but in fighting the terrorists, we must not try to create names for ourselves that I am functioning with efficiency, I am getting this, I want this recognition, I want this promotion. So that should not be there. Terrorism is a crime against humanity. And the world's biggest danger is going to be terrorism. For anything, there is going to be terrorism. Whether it is ethnic conflict, conflict of faith, economic conflict, competition in arming the countries. So the act of terrorism is going to be there in future to come. It is going to be the worst crime in human history. Not that terrorism has come suddenly, as I have mentioned from ancient Indian scriptures, Vedas, the crimes that we have recognized. These are the signs of terrorist activities in the modern society because everything has been being done with the help of science and technology. Science and technology has enriched life. Science and technology has also enriched the hands of the terrorism. They have strengthened the hands of the terrorism. So we have got to fight this with the aid of science and technology itself. It is not merely that with our pen and paper we are going to fight this one. And in the 21st century, someone projected by 2112, the world is going to change in such a way that the means of communication between the people is not going to be the words, not going to be the normal vocabulary that we use now. It is going to be through thoughts. We are going to exchange our feelings, that what we want to exchange now through words. By 2112, we are going to use only thoughts. It is going to replace internet, mobile. I'm just going to think someone and communicate through him. So the crime also could be communicated likewise. So science and technology has to help us to develop that. By 2112, It is said there would be only 3 languages in the world. No other languages will exist. Of the 3, English, Mandarin, and Spanish. They said all other languages will be extinct because there will be no need for any other language to exist. This English is already a killer language, absorbing many words from other languages and killing. So I won't be surprised. By next 500 years, there will be no language at all. We'll only act. So this is the state of affairs that we are going to have. We are going to see. So these developments of science and technology is aiding and abetting terrorism. And this is the same tool that has to help us fight terrorism. And ladies and gentlemen, one important thing that before I close my speech, I'd like to tell you that we speak of reforms, police reforms, reforms in governance, reforms in everything, society. What is reforms? What does it mean? Reform is not something that physically we achieve. Reforms must come from within. Reform is from within. If we have not been able to reform our governance, we have not reformed our thought processes, our emotions have not been refined. So we have to reform from within. All that new police act and all this are only tools to achieve the reformation of the mind. So first, the reformation of the mind is very important. And if we can reform the mind of the human being, that also will help in creating a stage for reduced terrorist activities. So it is all said and done, everything happens in the human mind first. First, in the human mind, your peace, your violence that occurs in human mind first. So let us reform the human mind. Along with what you are going to learn, the important lesson is that let us try to reform both our mind and the minds of our colleagues and our friends to fight what we consider as enemy of the society, which terrorism is today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.